Good evening. Thank you, Bengt, for these warm words of welcome. I'm not sure if I'm going to be translated or not, so no. Okay, so I can speak ongoing. I will try to be not too long for two reasons. One is I'm a little bit aphonic, so this is why the water. And secondly, I would like to leave enough space and time to answer your questions and to correspond to your interests. So basically what I will do, I will speak briefly about, I would say, three themes. One is the state of play, or where Israel stands right now. The second will be a little bit about the bilateral relations between Israel and Norway. And the third will be about the role of MIF as I see it. But maybe I should really start by thanking MIF and thank each and every one of you for being here this evening and for the great work that you are doing for the friendship and for the relations between Israel and Norway. So if you have applauded me, this is the case where you should, together with me, to applaud yourself. Okay, 2017 this year and the next year, 2018, are two historical years when it comes to Israel. We call them the Jubilee years because this year we celebrate a long list of jubilees. We celebrate 120 years since the first Zionist Congress in Basel in Switzerland in 1897. And we celebrate 100 years to the Balfour Declarations that recognized the millenaric linkage between the Jewish people and the land of Israel, and promised them to have our national home in this land. And we celebrate 70 years to the UN resolutions that decided about the creation of a Jewish state in the land of Israel in 1947, Resolution 181. And we celebrate 50 years for the Six-Day War, in which Israel was under a clear existential threat of being eliminated, but came out victorious. And we also celebrate 40 years for the visit of the Egyptian President Sadat to Israel, which marked, I would say, a before and after in the relations between Israel and its neighbors. And next year, 2018, will be, of course, also historical in the sense that Israel will celebrate 70 years of independence. So these 2 years are historical, and in a way they give us a good opportunity to look with a wider perspective where we started and where we are today. And a wider perspective is needed, and I feel it maybe more than others as an Israeli, because we Israelis in daily life, sometimes we tend to focus on the part of the glass, I wouldn't say even half the glass, but the part of the glass, this part, which is not full, but rather empty, while we ignore the other part, which is full. When you speak with an Israeli on a daily life, he will always tell you that this and that is wrong, and the government is bad, and we should do things otherwise and better, and why is it so hot, or otherwise why is it so cold? And why aren't the ministers better, etc., etc. In short, we are very good in complaining day in, day out. But then something very strange happens when you have this annual survey about the state of happiness of the different nations. I mean, you know that you Norwegians are number 1 in the world, but we are okay. We are number 11. So if we are number 11, it seems that some things that we are doing are okay. I mean, it can't be all bad, and if we are number 11. And then when you dig into it, you see that people are really happy. I mean, people are, the Israeli people, and I'm speaking about Jews and non-Jews, they feel good about Israel. They feel good about the lives that they have in Israel, about the standard of living, about their personal security, practically about everything. Now, if we remember that back in 1948, when we were established, we were a nation of refugees. 3 years after the Holocaust, we were 600,000 people. We lost 1% of these 600,000 in the war of independence. And today we are 8.5 million, and we have a flourishing economy, and we are a world power in innovation, and our GDP per capita is European. Then, I mean, we do something good. And this is really, I would say, this should be a source for pride. I mean, without in any moment putting aside the shadows which exist and the criticism which is, I would say, an integral part of our political and also not only political life, it's part of our culture. I mean, and I believe that the criticism is good because at the end of the day, it is a kind of incentive to make us better. But without forgetting that, we should remember that we have done something very good in these last 70 years. This is regarding Israel. And let's remember that our neighbors, I mean, I know that you have your differences with the Swedes, but we will gladly have the Swedes tomorrow as neighbors. I mean, our neighborhood is tough. It's wild sometimes. It's violent. It's a neighborhood in which living life as we live in Israel is not trivial. I mean, when we look around us, we see what's going on. Syria, terrible, practically a genocide in the last 5 or 6 years. Half 500,000 people dead. And then even in places which are more calm, there is no democracy, there is no civil society as we know it. So in the midst of all that, I mean, I believe we can feel ourselves quite confident. And also the level of threats, if you'd like, to our existence has dramatically diminished today in comparison with what we experienced 70 years ago. I mean, 70 years ago, 6 or 7 Arab armies declared the war against the Jewish community in the land of Israel in order to put an end to an existence. 50 years ago, in 1967, and this is something that I can testify, remembering as a 10-year-old boy, I remember the atmosphere of fear and anxiety. I remember that vividly when I was a boy at the outskirts of Tel Aviv about the threats to eliminate Israel, when the Egyptian radio station, the Voice of Thunder in Cairo, day in, day out, transmitted the threats to throw us Jews into the sea. When I, as a 10-year-old boy, was given a shovel to dig pits in public squares in the place where I was living there, because there were not enough private and public shelters. So I remember me going after school with a shovel in my hand to dig pits in order to face whatever was about to come. So today it's very different. Yes, we have the big problem, which is Iran. We have this combination of Islamic fanaticism, ultra-radicalism combined with nuclear aspirations. It shouldn't be ignored. It's by far, I repeat, by far, the most serious challenge that Israel has. All the rest is, in comparison, secondary. But look at all the rest. I mean, we were attacked back in '67 by 3 neighboring countries, Jordan, Egypt, and Syria. Today, with 2 of them, with Egypt and Jordan, we have peace. And Syria, look what became of Syria. And then, of course, we have the conflict with the Palestinians, which is something that is ongoing and attracts, I would say, a disproportionate level of attention sometimes. But this is not an existential threat to Israel, nor is Hezbollah. Hezbollah is a serious threat from the north with missiles that can hurt each and every point in Israel, but it's not existential. And in any case, the level of threats that Israel faces today is, by all comparison, a lot more inferior than it was 50 or 70 years ago. And there is another point. A greater part, and each time bigger part, of the Arab world understands, even if not voicing aloud this understanding, that Israel is not their enemy. They understand today that Israel is an anchor of stability, that in a region that is attacked by fanatics and radicals, Israel is a kind of guarantee for moderates and positive forces. Now, unfortunately, we cannot yet see it in Israeli embassies in many Arab countries, but we do face the reality all the time. I mean, only yesterday I had a long conversation with an Arab ambassador in Oslo from a country that does not hold diplomatic relations in Israel. And it becomes a kind of a routine. I mean, people understand. So this, in short, is I would say, the regional panorama in which Israel lives today. A strong state, strongly, when I say strong, I mean the economy is strong, the military is strong, the population is solid, the regional environment is less threatening than in the past, and there is a lot of confidence in what we call the Israeli project or the Zionist project. Again, we should always remember, no complacency. We don't relax even for a single moment. We always have to be ahead of our enemies regarding technology, regarding intelligence in the 2 senses of the word, intelligence about what we have here and intelligence about military intelligence. Because this is not static. This is evolving and changing, and technology is always running ahead, and we should be very much alert on every moment. But our situation is not bad at all. I'm saying all of that because sometimes there is a tendency to present Israel as a kind of a poor country, not poor in the economic sense, but rather poor in other senses, that it needs help, that it's threatened all the time. Yes, there are threats, but Israel is a strong and confident country. This was the first part, and now I come to the second part regarding the Israeli relations with Norway. After 3 years here, and I will complete 3 years in a short while, generally speaking, I'm quite happy with few tendencies. On the political level, I don't see any special problems right now with the current government. I mean, there is one factor which is very strong, which is Norway's deep involvement and interest in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. You know that in Oslo, the peace process between the two sides has been conceived, and the Norwegian governments along the years, including this one, showed a lot of interest in trying to push and help and support the state building of the Palestinian Authority in order to reach the solution of the two states for the two people, the solutions that the Israeli government supports. Now we feel that within this government we have a fair treatment, which is important for us. We have, of course, a lot of interest by the Foreign Ministry. We have three annual visits by the Minister of Foreign Affairs to Israel because of Norway's role in the mechanism of the donor countries to the Palestinian economy or state building. But what is, for me, even more important is that I feel, and this is maybe slow, this is maybe too slow, but it happens. What bothered me the most when I arrived at Norway 3 years ago was something that I always tell an anecdote, and I will repeat it here for the sake of the newcomers or others that were not present in past meetings. Yesterday we had the annual reception for the ambassadors with His Excellency, His Majesty the King. And the anecdote that I tell is always that is from 3 years ago when I presented credentials to King Harald. When there is a presentation of credentials by a new ambassador, there is a meeting, tete-a-tete meeting, only the two of us for 20 minutes or half an hour. And this happened immediately after the war in 2014, the last war in the summer of 2014. And the king was very much, he showed a lot of knowledge about the war. He was briefed about the outcome. He was also very much briefed about the Iranian nuclear issues that at the time was very much at the center of attention. But then, during the conversation, I told him that for me, Norway, or for Israel, Norway became especially interesting in recent years and relevant because we found in 2009 an important reservoir of oil and gas. In a way, 2009 for us is what 1969 have been for you, although the dimensions are smaller, but yet it is important for us. And I told His Majesty the King that I would be very much interested in working on the relations on this field because I believe that there is a huge potential for cooperation and win-win between Israel and Norway in oil and gas. So King Harald very frankly said, you know, I never heard about that. Never heard about the fact that you found oil and gas some years ago. And then when I went back to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, to your Ministry of Foreign Affairs, I told the people, guys, you were not briefing the king about the state of Israel, you were briefing the king about the state of conflict. And this, in a nutshell, was and still is, to a large extent, the problem of Israel in Norway, that in the collective Norwegian mind, by the way, whether you support Israel or hate it, in the collective Norwegian mind, Israel is still very much related to the conflict. I mean, I saw before there was some kind of poster here with a Palestinian flag. I mean, this is what people are talking about. And this is something that we should fight against. I mean, not avoiding the conflict, but making people know, understand, be aware of, that Israel for Norway is far beyond the issue of the Palestinians or the Middle Eastern conflicts. Because these are two normal countries that can and should have good and normal relations from which the two countries and the two people can get benefits and advantages. And this is why when I plan my schedule, my working schedule weekly or monthly or even annually, I am very much aware to, and I try very much that the issue of the conflict will not take too much of my time. It's difficult sometimes because, you know, it kinds of drives you in and you have to respond, etc., etc. But I want each and every one of you to know that each minute that we spend on speaking about the conflict is a minute that we do not spend or we waste on not speaking about innovation, economy, culture, etc., etc., etc. And if we are going to have an hour or a 2-hour conversation about the conflict, and I will convince every one of you that the Israeli case is right, you will still leave the whole with the impression that Israel is about the conflict. While, as a matter of fact, Israel is not about the conflict. Israel is about thousand things which are not the conflict, and about thousand things that are relevant to Norway. I mean, everybody, innovation is a buzzword. I mean, and I'm very glad to say that in the last 3 years, when there is the Innovation Week in Oslo, and whenever there is a cyber event, always we have managed to bring an Israeli speaker to be among the keynote speakers. And we are doing the same thing this year. And we are bringing people from Norway to exhibitions and conferences in Israel regarding those issues. Because I believe this is normal. And by the way, another thing that I always say, which is related to that, and in which I need your help, and I always say, is in the need to make the physical connections between the countries easier, in the sense that we need a direct airliner to operate. Because today we don't have it. And the only two capitals that Ben Gurion Airport near Tel Aviv does not have direct flights are Oslo and Lisbon. We even now have direct flights from Tel Aviv to Reykjavik. But I'm also ambassador to Iceland. But we don't have to between Tel Aviv and Oslo. And when there is a business person that instead of taking a direct flight that will bring you to Tel Aviv in 4 hours and a half, needs to change a plane in Vienna or Amsterdam or Brussels or Istanbul, and it takes 8 hours or 9 hours, then he might think twice if to go there. I'm not speaking so much about tourism. Tourists will go. But I'm speaking about business and economy. And business and economy, and at the end, are translated also into better relations between the countries. And I am happy to say that this government understands it, the Norwegian government, and we have signed an agreement on cooperation on R&D and innovation this January. I mean, the signatories were Benjamin Netanyahu, who is Prime Minister and Minister of Foreign Affairs, and from the Norwegian side, Minister Brende. So things are happening positively, maybe not fast enough the way I would have liked it to happen, but when I look at the numbers of the volume of trade, they are growing steadily every year. Again, not fast enough, and still the salmon is a heavy part of it, and the technology is too small, but things are changing, and it's important that you know, and if you are in the business, and if you have the open mind to look towards Israel and see what can be done. So this is about Israel and Norway. This has been the second part, and the last part is about you, about MIF. And again, I really, I don't know if you know how unique you are. I mean, MIF is something that does not exist in many countries or organizations like MIF. The size of MIF, the way MIF operates, the number of members, the commitment. This is very unique. And I know that by now you help some of our friends in neighboring countries, like in Sweden. And this is very important. This is, for an Israeli ambassador, this is a proof of, I would say, deep feelings of solidarity with Israel within the Norwegian nation, and B, this is a working tool, an important working tool. And it was suffice to see how recently, and Bengt have mentioned it after the LO resolution on the boycott, how the number of new members increased. And it was really a very good indicator. So what do I need from MIF? What do I need from you? As Bengt mentioned, you are not a political organization, and this is very good. You should be neutral, politically speaking. And what I would like to see is, and I say it out openly, is more political work in the left. I want to see, especially in the Labour Party, more activity of MIF. And within the Labour Party, among the Labour Party in general, and among the Labour Party youth, I want to feel the activity of MIF in these circles in which we have a problem. And don't be afraid. I mean, there are two elements here. One is that we don't need a lot of people. You know what they say? They say that when there is a great darkness around, one candle makes a difference. And when there is a group of 100 people, for example, or a forum, when 100 or 50 people are talking in one voice, it's enough that 2, 3, or 5 voices will say the opposite. You will be the candle. And the other reasons that you don't have to be afraid is because you know the facts. You know, part of the problem in those forums, and especially in the left, and when you see it also in the media frequently, is people simply do not know the very basic facts about the Middle East. They are brainwashed day in, day out for decades, not years, decades, by lies. So if suddenly there is a debate and people come into the room well equipped with facts, with arguments, with the correct version of history, then you can make a change. For example, I'm sure that if in the circles of LO there would have been a minimal presence of people who know the facts, there would have been a very good chance to avoid this resolution. I don't attach a lot of importance to it, but it's better not to have it than to have it. So, to conclude, my message to you is really to try and think and work, especially, I would say, the leaders of MIF, in an organized way, in order to make the voice of MIF heard in the political left, of course, not forgetting ever the other parties in the political spectrum, because as you said, you should work all across the political map, because this is important. It's important for the state of Israel, it's important for the relations between Israel and Norway. Thank you very much, and I am now open for your questions.